We've tried to avoid some talk of politics and things that are going on in the world, but it's pretty hard to avoid talking about politics when you have an attempted assassination on a president of the United States and a current leading candidate as president of the United States. Like, what in the world are we dealing with here? Now, the last attempted assassination on a president was Ronald Reagan. If you go back before that, you go to JFK. Then if you go back to that, before that, you go to Abraham Lincoln. I would argue that all of those presidents were disruptors. They were presidents who did not like the status quo. They didn't like the swamp. They wanted to get rid of political corruption and empower people. 3 of those being Republican and 1 of those being a Democrat. And why is it that the presidents who are against the political grain are being assassinated or attempted to assassinate? And so this show, we're going to talk about that. And it really ties into your money, how you invest. It ties into politics, election years. A lot of clients are telling us they're scared and I want to get out and wait or hold some cash, or I want to be in, or I want, I'm going to invest this way if one president wins, and I'm going to invest in a different way if another president elect wins. So it's a real mess. And this is a great time for financial detox. And as the show states, we are going to detoxify you just like a good health cleanse and getting that alcohol out of your system. We got to get the bad information out as it relates to your money so you can better protect yourself, preserve your wealth, and grow it for your family and your future.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what a scary moment, right? I was literally in a giant shuttle bus thing with a bunch of, actually I was stuck with the kid bus. No joke. All the adults on the bus behind me.
They put you on the short bus, Alex?
We were in, yeah, it was, yeah, actually it was shorter. But when I heard, this is a weird story, but I'm going to tell it anyways, because this is the kind of information, this is the way that a lot of our clients, a lot of investors, a lot of people that want to make money and save and invest, get their news now. I'm sitting there with 2 or 3 or 4 teenagers. My daughter's one of them. She's just turned 14, and her friends. And one of them's on Snapchat, right? I don't like social media. I really don't at all. I don't have any of it except for LinkedIn, which you could argue social media, but I use it for business, I think. Anyway, she's like, oh my gosh, there was a shooting at the Trump rally. I'm like, and I just dismissed it. Like, that's not real because it's Snapchat, right? But then a couple other ones, like maybe 5-10 minutes later, we're in Mexico, right? This is on Saturday. And they validated it through other social media. And I'm like, okay, maybe this is a real thing. Like, what really happened? And so that's how I'm learning about this thing. Immediately, you know what I thought? I'm like, oh my gosh, they're going to close the border. I'm going to be stuck in Mexico. If I was an investor, I'm like, the market on Monday, what's it going to do? Is it going to be, right. Is it going to drop? Is it going to go up? Should I do anything about this? And then I thought about all of what we're doing, and I knew we were going to record this show today. And I'm like, what do we tell people, Jason? Like, how do we help people center back onto reality of what they can control, what they can't, and stay focused on their long-term goals? Like, what do we say? Right?
I mean, that's what we're going to get into. Let's do it. I mean, let's dive in and start talking about some things.
So in a normal election year, what do we tell people? Let's pretend like the assassination attempt put aside for even just a moment, if possible, but normal election year, what do you say?
Right. I mean, it's amazing how much emotion it draws, but it's been way more in recent election years. And I've done this for 27 years. I know I only look 30. Actually, I look 60, even though I'm 50.
It's good lighting, huh?
Yeah, right. Shayna and Brian, our producers, they got lighting on us today. So we're really up in our game here. It's the real deal at Financial Detox. But it's become more and more contentious. And we did a webinar earlier today, and we were talking about investing with a tax mindset. I think it was a great webinar. I couldn't help myself but to get into investment decisions regarding political and election years in environments like this. And I think we have, and maybe I'll save that for the end, kind of a thesis on where we need to go as human beings, and I think how it works. But let's just go through a couple quick stats, right? In the average 1 year period. So if you take a 1 year period, the average of all 1 year periods, the market is up 74% of the time. I could be off a percent or two, but it's about 74%.
Ooh, which market?
Yeah, the stock market. Let's call it the S&P 500. Good point. Now you're unpacking a bag of previous shows.
I'm just teeing you up, man.
I love it. So if we measure the S&P 500, the average 500 stocks, pretty much large cap growth, 74% of 1 year periods, it's positive. If you take election years outside of that, 82% of election years, the market is positive.
which is 4 out of the past 24 going back to the 1920s, even through all those assassinations and attempted assassinations you talked about. I read about that more, by the way. There's actually more presidents that have had this happen besides those 3 or 4, but those are the big names that we all know very well, right?
Yeah.
That's crazy high numbers.
It's crazy high numbers. I mean, and even if you think about volatility in general in the markets, right? And you talk about here's an election year, and should I be trying to get out and get in, or should I do something different because it's an election year? Well, you got to know that 70% of 1 year periods, markets in general, go up. So to try to get in or get out is pretty tricky because you have to get 2 bets right. And I would argue that your bet is less than a 50-50 because when to get out, you're trying to guess it's basically there's 365 days in a year. How many trading days? About 220 trading days a year. You got to guess when to get out. And then you have to in turn around and guess when to get in. Let's just give you the big benefit of the doubt and say it's a 50-50 chance. Well, it's a 50-50 chance. If you do 50% to get out and 50% to get back in, you only have a 25% chance of being right. That's not good. It's not good. And in election years may be worse, but here's the kicker. When you look at 3-year periods, your statistical odds of having a successful investment experience, you're now in the mid to high 80s. If you go 5 years, you're in the mid to high 90s in a truly diversified portfolio. So does all this guessing and wondering and trying to time the market and worrying about that, does it really bring any benefit to the table? And I would argue it does not. So should you invest differently in an election year? Probably not. Probably not invest any differently. Have a plan, have a diversified portfolio, know what you're trying to accomplish with your portfolio so that then you can invest around that and make that happen.
I'm going to compare it to COVID real quick because I was reading an article written by, or an op-ed by David Booth, right? One of the founders of Dimensionals, who we love their academic evidence-based approach. They haven't been right all the time on all the things, but the research and their comments are on point. At the end of March 2020, the S&P was down 20% for the year, but investors that stayed in the S&P were rewarded at the end of the 2020 year. It was up 18.4, 38% turnaround from its March lows. How scary was the pandemic? I mean, you know what I mean? And then put that into context of what we're dealing with right now.
Maybe one of the biggest events in our generation, right? You shut down the global economy and whatnot. That's a great analogy. And it goes back to in the average year, there's 14% volatility from peak to trough. But there's so many years, about half, where the volatility is more than that. Trying to time it becomes a total mess. It becomes so difficult to time when to get out, when to get in. So we stand by, and as a financially detoxified human being, you've got to understand that game is eventually a big loser's game. The winner's game is by developing a strategy, a process, investing with a purpose and intention to make the best financial life for yourself, solving for your future expenses and needs, building a portfolio that delivers that, continuing to review and monitor it. I think it's good. What about this assassination?
I was just going to say, so now let's go a little further out on the spectrum of this is not a normal election year. Thank you for the video. This just happened. So now what happens? Does the whole rule book change?
I hope one thing happens, and this is where I'm going to get on a bit of a soapbox here. I'll try not to make the monologue too long. We have unbelievable human beings who are clients who are left of left. They're left. They are left. They are liberal. They think that the liberal policies are correct and that Republicans are whacked. We have Republican clients who are right wing and conservative, and they think that those policies are correct and the left is whacked. Now, I promise you, and I know this is a fact because I talk to both sides and I love them both and they both have points. But when I tell them, if we could zap your memory with the Men in Black pen, do we got a video of that, producer Brian, like the Men in Black little theme where they, isn't that where they hit them on the head with the thing or they zap them and then they forget their memory? Yeah, you shine it in their eyes. So the Men in Black theme, if we could take the general populace of our country and you could zap them with the Men in Black pen, put them in a room, line up all the real policies. There you go. Here's the pen. We're getting zapped. All right. So boom, look at the light. I love it. So if we did that with Democrats, with liberals, with Republicans and conservatives, you put them all together, you zapped them with a pen and you put all the issues on a board. 80% of those issues, you would very easily 80% of the people would come to agreement on almost all the issues. If you talked about them if you zapped their mind of their previous political bias, the social media confirmation bias that has been pounding them in the head the last 10 years, getting worse every day. This is what I think your investment decision should be affected this way, is like, we have to change our behaviors as human beings. And I'm guilty of it too. I have to change my behaviors where instead of looking at things through the social media bias and the political lens that is stuffed into my brain against my own voluntary will. I guess it is my voluntary will because I turn it on. We have to think differently. And I hope that's what happens here, right, Alex? I hope that we see a real kind of coming together. But the rhetoric, the violent rhetoric, the burning down cities, you have tons of videos of Clinton, Nancy Pelosi, Maxine Waters. Literally, I've got a 2-minute reel of the left calling for violence. Biden said we need to put a bullseye on Trump 5 days before the attempted assassination. I don't care if you're left or right. That's nonsense. To talk like that is, I think you have blood on your hands. I don't think that you can do that and say that. And we need to come together as a people and be stronger than social media. And we need to, I think, come to the middle, because 80% of the population, if not 80, it's at least 70, I believe, are all independent, common sense thinkers. And we need to stop letting social media push us out into the extremes.
Yeah, I think it's good for whoever's listening to hear that too, because we're just human beings. We have families, we have kids, wives, we have, we're affected by everything too. We're not literally just some robots behind computers that are managing, our clients' money. So we have to go through the same process in our minds. How are we going to react to what we just saw, and how are we going to coach and guide our clients through yet another major life event like the pandemic? Like before that, it might have been Brexit. Before that, it might have been the debt crisis I was talking about earlier. Yeah. There's always going to be something new and something scary. Booth talks about managing risk. He talks about accepting investing for what it is. It's not fun. It's painful. It's difficult. And that's why you get rewarded for investing through everything in life. I think that's how life works for the most part. The most rewarding things are not easy.